Swan's Cafe in the Boston Park Plaza Hotel. This is the Smoki Bacon and Dick Concannon Show with co-host Joanna DiTillo. So stay tuned. Our guest today has written a book about a woman who's 58 years old and has always had it more or less her way. She is the perfect Brahmin. She is from a reserved family. She has a couple of children, and everything is going well for her when there is an unexpected situation comes up. This is called Being Mrs. Alcott by Nancy Geary. Nancy Geary received the Washington Irving Award for one of her novels and has now written a book about a woman who has to face life in a completely different way than she was brought up to expect. Would you bring our viewers through it, what happens and how she has two sons and she has to face this situation?
Well, the book, the reason I wrote the book is I was wanting to explore the idea of how much of our life is fate and how much is accident and how much is choice. And 58 seemed a very important threshold for me, that somebody that's lived enough of their life to be at that juncture and yet have enough of their life ahead of them.
Totally unprepared.
And totally unprepared.
To come to terms with reality.
Yes, and she has been, the reason it's called Being Mrs. Alcott is the thing that she's been her whole life, is her husband's wife. And when the book opens, she finds out, the very first scene is that she has her credit card cut because they have no money. And she also, the reader learns that she's sick. And so then the book goes back in time and brings you sort of up to date, and then the story picks up with what happens to her and how she has to come to reflect on her life.
I have to tell you, Nancy, I know this story over and over again, because at my age, I've seen this happen, that all of a sudden a woman is put out on an icicle, an ice float, and pushed out to sea to, to take on challenges that they never had and never thought they were going to have. Now, with Mrs. Alcott, you portray a woman, once again, who's had the perfect life, has come from a very civil background, a rather reserved background. I think in this life today, life has become very raucous, and sometimes I get upset about that reserve, and especially in New England, there is that British so-called reserve. But I am now faced with another kind of society where there's screaming and yelling, what have you, and I'm wondering, isn't there a happy medium here somewhere?
Well, it'd be nice if there was. I mean, one of the parts of the book that's the most fun to write is the sort of clash of cultures when they're selling their house and the new buyers are very much a new money world and very crass, and they have all kinds of help, and they sort of barge in on her, and she's in shock. I mean, it's a kind of a world that she has been not exposed to at all.
You can almost, hers is a very fake world. There's no question about it.
Well, there's no emotion there, yeah.
Yes, and she's totally unprepared to come into this world where she just doesn't have any money, and she's going to have to go out and fend for herself, and she has two young boys who are very unhappy about this. I mean, this is a very tough number, but I still feel, can't I have civility too?
Yeah, well, you hope. I mean, it was very interesting for me to explore the relationship with her and her sons, because when I started writing this book, I was a young mother, and I was thinking a lot about how we...
And a law school graduate.
Yeah.
Yes.
But how we want our children to turn out a certain way, and what happens if they don't. And that was a question that gets explored in the book, because her children, for all of her efforts, are not the kind of people that she wishes they would be in the end. And that's a huge...
they're not prepared to face with something like this.
Yeah.
Have you met many women that have had this happen? Or how did you do your research?
Well, I think I knew, just from my own background, I knew women that were like this, that really, I mean, if someone had said to them, your husband's leaving, you're going to have to manage your own finances or something, wouldn't have a clue how to do it. But I also find more and more that my peers, it's sort of reverted back to that now. There's a lot of women that have given up their careers, their mothers, and they're completely protected all over again.
And they're fine so long as the marriage works out.
As long as
but
there's no
as
problems,
we know,
yeah.
But we know 50% of the marriages don't
Yeah.
work out. And I swear to God, I know 50% of all those people. Now, what do you think the answer is? Because you're your generation's younger than I am. I keep coming to the assumption women can't have it all.
I agree with you.
I mean, this is a very cynical, result of talking to people. They just can't have it all.
No, I think you're right. And people have said to me when I've spoken to people about this book, they've said you have a very old-fashioned view. And I think I do. I think that this sense of women wanting to have it all means that you can't do everything well, and something suffers. And for some people, their family suffers. For some people, their career isn't what they want to do. And maybe they're going to have to, at the end of the day, make a choice.
Now, it's a very tough. My husband died when my children were teenagers, and I had worked before, so I was kind of lucky that I had something to fall back on. But you can't. Something suffers along the way. I really don't know the answer, and I feel, my favorite cliche is God is definitely a man, because if God were a woman, men would have the babies.
Right.
But
right.
anyhow, this is a marvelous book, Being Mrs. Alcott by Nancy Geary. It really takes you into what happens when a woman has the rug pulled out from underneath her completely financially and is totally unprepared to cope with it. What the answer is, I have no idea. See, but it was interesting to read your book. It's a great
thank
book.
you very much.
Thank you for
thank
being
you for
our
having
guest.
me.
In 1963, the Boston Ballet was founded by E. Virginia Williams, and it was the first repertory ballet in Boston and in Massachusetts. Since then, it has come a long, long way. It was at over a store in Mass Avenue. It's now in a beautiful building in the South End. And in 2001, an artistic director was established, and his name is Mikko Nissinen. And he came with an incredible international reputation, and he has given the Boston Ballet an international reputation. He is an accomplished dancer, actor, and creative director. Now, you have an incredible background. You started in Finland. You started dancing when you were 11 years old.
That's
you got your first award when you were 16 years old. You performed all over Europe. Then you came to California, went up to Canada. Would you tell our viewers, how did you come to land in Boston, to our luck? But if they...
Well, it's very interesting because my first contact point with America was I went to study in New York during the summertime. I took classes with Stanley Williams, and I immediately fell in love with American dance and the energy and the musicality. So it was always sort of a dream to come to America and dance, and I came to the right time, to the right place, joined San Francisco Ballet in '87, danced 10 years there under the directorship of Helge Thomasson, and I always knew I wanted to be a director after my dancing days. Took over a company in Canada, and within 4 years got a call from Boston Ballet.
But you kind of skipped a huge area there from age 16. I mean, you with troops, and you were dancing in Switzerland, you were dancing in Germany, you were dancing in France. I mean, you had extraordinary influences, the Kirov Ballet, if you'd talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all in the making of Mikko.
Well, I was very young and very hyper kid. I did any kind of sports. I did them from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. And I always said that my hyperactivity as a kid led me into dance.
Sounds
because
like Edward Villela, who was very hyper
Yes.
and active and
Yeah.
sports.
Yeah. And I fell in love with the dance because it was aiming at the perfection. And being a perfectionist, that was very interesting, and it was difficult. And it was a place where you could put all your energy and there was still room to go. And I saw Nureyev and Brishnikov, and I thought that was exciting. At the same time, I was in the Finnish National Ballet School and was supering in operas, ballets, and operettas. And the life in theater seemed so much more interesting and fascinating than the reality.
How did your parents feel about this? I mean, you were a young man traveling.
My both parents were artists, so I always say that they supported me in a way that they didn't come in between. So they were very supportive of that, but it was a lot to juggle school and sometimes doing 20 productions a month, 20 performances, and made for very long days.
Now, you must have had some mentors along the way.
Well, I was always very taken with my teachers because I really wanted to learn everything possible they had to give. And just at the point when I thought, all right, I want to be a professional dancer, and I thought in about 3 years, I was offered a contract at the age of 15 at the Finnish National Ballet, and then it just rolled. My second role was a soloist role, and then I got a promotion the following year.
At
And
16, you won
Yeah.
the Finnish National Ballet Contest.
yeah, there was the first Finnish National Ballet competition, and entered it just for the experience, happened to win it, and then I took a year of leave of absence after being already 2 years in the company. I knew that George Balanchine, Pavlova, Brezhnikov, Makarova, everybody came from St. Petersburg. So as a young dancer, I thought there must be something special there.
I got to get there.
Yeah, and I got a scholarship, spent a year in a graduating class. I got to dance on the Kirov stage. It was a wonderful year.
Now, I hear with all this energy, you had an accident. I mean,
That's right. Tore my knee. Was
what happens to a dancer? I mean, when this happens, I mean,
Well, usually, it was a situation that I needed an operation, so I knew I would lose 2, 3, 4 months, and I was right at the age in Finland when they draft you into the military service, and I could have said, "I'll take care of this, continue dancing," but I wouldn't have gotten my passport. So I thought, all right, this is my opportunity. I'm going to miss almost half a year anyway. I do the military service, and then as I was done, I went.
Military service is for how long in Finland?
1 year.
1 year.
Yeah. So then
Interesting.
I went to New York to train, to get it back in shape, and took a job in a Dutch National Ballet in Amsterdam. It was a wonderful company that danced classical ballets, has the largest Balanchine ballet repertoire outside of New York City Ballet, and 3 active house choreographers. So it was really artistically.
Okay, with all this, with the Russian and the Swiss, and then I was looking at your background, Germany, France, San Francisco, Canada, you were up in
Calgary.
Calgary, Canada. There has to be a difference in the presentation, or is it all the same? Tell our viewers.
No, it's interesting because ballet is different everywhere. Russia has their perspective on ballet, and naturally the big classical ballets, they were born in Russia. Then they traveled to England and France, and now
What happens when it comes to England, as the difference between Russia and England? I have the feeling that the English ballet is more formal, more classical.
Well, it is a little bit more formal because maybe the people are a little bit more formal. But when it first, let's say, Sleeping Beauty entered into England was 1923. Zhezh Diaghilev's Ballet Russe brought a full evening production. Very shortly thereafter, English staged their first own version, and that has become the landmark. It is a little bit more controlled, a little bit more stylized. But it's stylized in Russia, but they're stylized to different sides, a little differently. For me, that's fascinating, and that's why I think one of the biggest things that I have to offer, that I have been insider in Scandinavian dance, in Russian dance, in Central European dance. Half of my career I danced in North America. Now I've been running companies in North America. Because
and you were the principal dancer in the Marin Ballet, San Francisco.
I was a principal dancer in San Francisco Ballet for 10 years. I was artistic director of the Marin Ballet, which is a large ballet school, right after I stopped. And what I think I can offer is a perspective from both sides of the Atlantic.
I would say so. Tell me, who is your favorite choreographer? Do you have one?
Well, it's like you have 10 children. Which one do you love more?
Okay.
All
right, give me 2 or 3.
Of course,
Balanchine, obviously.
Balanchine, Mark Morris, William Forsythe, Geary Killian, Frederick Ashton, of course, Maurice Petipa, Auguste Bournonville.
Okay,
Lucinda Childs.
Out of this, Mikko, is there a desire for you to become a choreographer?
I think art of choreography is something that you do out of a need. You have something inside that you just have to put out. And I was around 30 years old when I was playing around with the idea, should I be a choreographer? And I said, no, probably I shouldn't be a choreographer, because choreography should be a product of a heart, not the product of the head, the intelligence.
Interesting.
So I do stage big ballets, but I don't choreograph original ideas. I think my talents lie in getting troops ready, organization, being a director. And I looked around, world is full of mediocre choreographers. I didn't want to add one into the list.
Being the dancer, the teacher, and,
Yeah.
and the director and the producer.
Exactly. And I looked at the directors, and there's not so many. And I thought, my talents and my ambition is very much aligned in that, and I think I can do a very, very good job.
Now, I know you're a Renaissance person, and not only are you doing the classics, but you get into the contemporary. So tell our viewers about the contemporary presentations.
Well, I always think that the ballet company has its roots in a community, and we have to have a product that represents the art form, but at the same time it has to really connect with the community. You have a part of the community who want to come to see the story ballets, the big productions. Another part of the community reacts very much to sort of a contemporary thing, and there's no story, which is, abstract ballet,
But
let's
something
say.
new that is happening
Yes.
in the field of ballet. I think that's terribly important. So.
Oh, it's vital. It's absolutely important. So I will try to, I welcome everybody to the Boston Ballet. I don't care where the individual's point of entry is through the classical ballets or through the contemporary ballets. Then in between there's a whole neoclassical vocabulary and repertoire, which is probably where the accent is in today's dance.
So how do you bring this along? How do you bring contemporary ballet along?
I do programming in such manner that it engages people, but I'm not trying to, if I know your taste, I'm not going to come 100% to your way. I come 80%, and then I put some things that I think...
Are you staging contemporary ballet?
Absolutely, by some of the finest choreographers, Geary, Killian, William Forsythe, Mark Morris, but it's in a balance, in a percentage, in a repertoire. Mm-hmm. Academic classic works, your Big Swan Lakes and Sleeping Beauties, then the neoclassical repertoire that George Balanchine works represents very well, contrasted with the contemporary works. That's a ballet company of today for me, and that's what I think is going to be the most successful and dynamic in a community like Boston. At the same time, that kind of company can play a very good role in a national level and international.
No question. It's 360 degrees. It's
Yeah.
the whole ball of wax. I want to get I know you have an outreach program here. I'm seeing the young ballerinas running around. Tell us about, viewers would like to know about your outreach program.
Well, we have absolutely unprecedented outreach program. There's nothing that I have ever seen in Boston or anywhere in the world. And this is very easy because I'm not going to say I did this. This was something my predecessors put in place.
But it has been growing under your tutelage.
Yes, Bruce Marks started it, and right now we have the city dance, we have the taking steps, we get into the every third grade classroom in a greater Boston area.
Every third grade classroom?
Every year.
Oh, that's impressive.
It's amazing. We have adaptive dance that work with the people who have a coordination skill issues, and the results are unbelievable.
I think that's absolutely terrific. I'm getting a signal that we have a few minutes now to talk about for people who want to join as members, people who want to go to the ballet. Do you have the numbers that they can call?
Yes.
Mikko? Very important.
Well, our next program is called Classic Balanchine, 3 masterworks from George Balanchine's Ballo della Regina, La Valse to music of Ravel, and 4 Temperaments. That runs between May 3rd and May 6th. Right after that, the following week, we open with the full evening production of Giselle that runs from May 10th to 20th. And you can get your tickets at the Telecharge at 1-800-447-7400 or at the Boston Ballet box office. And I hope to see all of you in the theater.
Our guest today has been Mikko Nissinen, and he is the director of the Boston Ballet. And he is committed to maintaining the classic beauty of the older ballet, but also bringing contemporary ballet in. And as he said, they have an absolutely extraordinary outreach program here that reaches every third grade pupil. I can hardly believe that, Mikko, in Boston. That is just fantastic.
It's remarkable.
Thank you so much for being our guest.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Our guest today, Julie Ward Harrison, author of Don't Leave Me This Way, had a perfectly normal life and a good husband, and one day she's driving on Route 128 on an average day going into work, and her life changed that day. Little did she know how much it was going to change, and hit on so many different things. Her friends, the law courts, her body, what have you. But would you take our viewers through this, that day?
On July 17, 1997, I was going to work and doing my normal routine of thanking God for my home, my family, and my job, and my 3-year-old son, my husband. And
who was very supportive to you.
He's my rock.
Yes.
He calls me his hard place.
He was before.
Yes, yes. But around 2 o'clock, I started having a massive pain in my right quadrant of my head that felt like a volcano. And evidently at the time, every time my blood pressure was pulsing, it was releasing blood in my brain. I happened to not want to cause an alarm with anybody, and I asked the secretary to drive me to the hospital. And at the hospital, I was put on a gurney, and they checked my vitals, and everything seemed okay, but the intensity started growing, and all of a sudden I was being rushed down a hallway towards a CAT scan, and that's when I had the stroke. And I looked at the nurse and I said, "Am I having a stroke?" Which is very odd because I was 37 years old, my baby had just turned 3, and I didn't know anybody who had a stroke, so I thought it was odd that I'd be even asking that. And from there on, I had brain surgery, emergency brain surgery that was just to stop the bleeding, but they felt I'd need further reparative surgery. And that's when my journey began. And I wrote a book covering my whole medical experience. I wrote it in, people often ask me why I wrote the book, and I didn't write it for cathartic reasons. I actually wrote it because I felt like I had so much to say about the medical system. And
that's where I want to interrupt here. I want to say, because what they said to you about a week later was, you will never walk again.
Yes.
Now, you were being bedridden and flat on your back. You fought back. Is this an inherent part of your personality? You said, I am not buying into what the doctors are saying. This is to me the beautiful part of your story.
As a matter of fact, I do speaking engagements all over the country regarding motivational speaking and patient empowerment, and also to medical community as well. One of the things I talk about is that I was labeled that I was in denial, and I also was impulsive, because right hemisphere stroke textbook says that your hemisphere, you have a impulsive nature. Well, I happened to be impulsive before my stroke, and I didn't like being labeled something that was somewhat of a negative connotation.
I'd rather call it spirited, that
right.
In fact you question things
everything.
With a spirit. Yes.
Everything. And when I was labeled denial, it was because I was constantly joking. Humor was my armor and shield to cope with what was happening to me. And I often said to them, if I was truly in denial, would I have been able to ask the questions that I was asking? And I feel that there's a fine line between determination and denial. And I think that one of the things that the medical community needs to learn is there's no parameters around the human spirit. And I think we can really soar as patients. I was told that I was going to die, and I actually was planning my funeral. I often joke about it in the sense that I told my mother that I wanted to be buried in my wedding dress because we paid a lot of money for it, and I wanted to get our money's worth going into eternity. And I even said, it won't zip all the way up, but I'll be on my back.
But the thing was that they had said you'll never walk again, you will probably die, but your friends around you gathered around you, your husband gathered around you. We don't have that much time. There was a reason for this, which I found extraordinary, your stroke, something that you ate.
Oh, I had it, well, we didn't know it at the time, but prior to my stroke, I had taken a cold medicine, and within 2 hours I was having the hemorrhage. And 4 years later, we found out that there was a study that was done on this certain component that was across the board on all over-the-counter medicines and cold medicines, and they have removed that ingredient from the market at the time, so nobody should be in danger at this point. But I happened to win the lottery. It was like winning the lottery because it was so rare that it happened, but I was one of those classic examples of this study that caused hemorrhagic stroke in young women between 19 and 39.
Now you have the complete use of your right side, but you don't have the use of your left side, but you're working on that.
My left side is still, it's called hemiparesis. I have neuropathy and proprioception problems where I don't know where my body parts are in space. So I'm constantly touching myself to see,
to make sure,
because I don't know where it is, and plus the neuropathy doesn't give me any sensation. So I feel that I'm going to run.
Yes,
that's my goal.
Julia. I know you are, and I want you to come back when you start running. Our guest today has been Julia Ward Harrison, and the name of her book, Garrison, and the name of her book is Don't Leave Me This Way. And she suffered a massive hemorrhage, and the doctor said there were absolutely no hope. Now she is walking, talking, and laughing. She was backed by her friend. She was backed by her husband, which goes to show you how much importance that was also with your system. And you lecture, you go about, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, how would they get in touch with you, Julia?
Contact the HarperCollins Speakers Bureau. I do 3 different topics. I just spoke to Harvard last week on self-publishing because I originally self-published my book and it took off to the bestseller list in 2 months, and that's how I ended up with HarperCollins. I also do a motivational talk and patient empowerment. And I have another talk that's directed at medical community and staff.
Your website?
www.juliafoxgarrison.com.
Thank you so much, Julia. You're a great example of things that can be fought and won.
Just do it.
Yes. Join us next week, same time, same station.